This is a full story. Kitten wishes you all a happy and enjoyable story. That night, I received a call from my wife on my way home. She said she had made dinner and was waiting for me to return. After hanging up the phone, my whole back was drenched in cold sweat because 3 hours ago, I had just strangled her to death with my own hands. I returned home and carefully opened the door. I saw her standing emotionlessly by the dining table setting the dishes. On the table was my favorite braised pork. The bright red braised pork paired with her emotionless stiff face. Plus, she was wearing a white dress, but around her neck was a blood-red silk scarf. The whole scene felt unsettlingly strange. "Wash your hands, I'll stir-fry some vegetables, then we can eat," she said, wiping her hands on her apron and turning to the kitchen. How could she still be alive? I clearly strangled her to death. I had checked her breath and heartbeat. I had buried her in the ground. How could she still be alive? I rushed to the bathroom, splashing cold water on my face. I looked at myself in the mirror, shaking my head forcefully, but still couldn't make sense of what was happening. Could it be that I was dreaming? No, it couldn't be. I had planned this for so long. The sensation of strangling her neck was so real. Her distorted face from suffocating was right in front of me. I pinched my face hard. It hurt. That couldn't possibly have been a dream. But now she was alive and standing right in front of me. My head was pounding more and more, and I shook it violently. Could she be a ghost? Even if she was a ghost, did she come back just to cook me dinner? "Honey, why aren't you coming out yet?" She held a black fruit knife and pushed open the bathroom door. Her face still had that emotionless expression, stiff and terrifying. The red silk scarf around her neck made it look even more terrifying. A red silk scarf. Why was she still wearing a red silk scarf at home? I turned and took a few steps closer, ready to inspect the scarf. But she suddenly turned around, avoiding my gaze, and the fruit knife in her hand almost slashed my chest. "Come out and eat." I silently followed her to the dining table where there was nothing but my favorite meaty dishes. But today I had no appetite at all. She, on the other hand, was eating heartily, chewing the greasy meat in big mouthfuls. It made her look even more bloody and terrifying. "I'll pour a glass of water," I said, standing up and then quietly sneaking behind her. When she wasn't paying attention, I grabbed her red silk scarf and pulled it off. That's when I saw the red marks on her neck, the marks left from when I strangled her 3 hours ago. From the force of my tug, her body lost balance, almost falling to the floor. I didn't care whether she was human or a ghost. I mounted her and once again grabbed her neck. No, last time I failed to strangle her to death, and that's why she came back to haunt me. This time I couldn't make the same mistake. I grabbed her neck with my left hand and used my right to reach for the black fruit knife on the table. Gripping the knife in both hands, I raised it high and brought it down heavily, stabbing it into her chest. She convulsed a few times and then stopped moving. Bright red blood poured out from her chest, forming a small crimson river on the floor. I bent down close to her face. She no longer had any breath and her pupils were dilated. I leaned close to her mouth and sniffed forcefully. It was the smell of blood. She was definitely dead. I finally felt at ease. I didn't have time to clean up, so I immediately shoved her into a large suitcase, dragged it down to the underground garage, and placed it in the car trunk. This time, I would throw her into an even more remote cliff by the sea. The car drove eastward towards the city until I saw the ocean. I pushed the suitcase containing her body off the cliff by the sea. At that moment, my phone rang. It was Serena, her best friend, my beloved mistress. "How is it?" she asked. "Don't worry, I've taken care of everything." I watched the suitcase disappear into the white waves, then said, 10 years of marriage and I was finally free. I could finally be with the one I truly loved. At my wedding with Hailey, I met her best friend Serena. In the 6th year of my marriage to Hailey, I got together with Serena. Serena is the best woman in the world, and I only want to be with her. For 4 years, I thought about divorcing Hailey countless times, but kept backing out. Not because I still loved her, but because I didn't want to split my assets with her. When we got married, I never imagined that my company would catch the wave of industry growth and turn into such a large-scale business. At that time, I was still a poor guy, and she married me, which was undoubtedly a downgrade for her. I never dared to think about property division or notarizing assets. Besides, my company's success wouldn't have been possible without her family's resources and help. But now times had changed. Her family's business quickly withered, and her parents passed away one after the other, leaving her in despair. Hailey never gave me a son or even a daughter. Now she was just a powerless, useless woman. How could I possibly divide such a huge fortune with her? I just couldn't accept it. I originally wanted to wait a few more years until she couldn't stand it anymore, and maybe she would ask for a divorce herself. That would save me a lot of trouble. But then Serena got pregnant. She threatened that if I didn't get rid of Hailey, she would abort the child. I really wanted to have a son. I couldn't hesitate any longer and finally took action. I strangled her to death in the suburbs. After confessing confirming she was dead. I sighed in relief, buried her in a pit I had dug earlier, and drove home. But on my way back, I received her call. She said she was waiting for me to come home for dinner. When I got home, she was already preparing dinner as if nothing had happened. I had no choice but to kill her again, this time with a knife, ensuring there would be no chance of failure. No matter how many times she comes back, I will kill her without hesitation. She had already delayed my life for 10 years, and I wouldn't allow her to waste any more of it. I thought about this as I drove back home. When I arrived at the door, I took a deep breath. I was scared. I was afraid she would appear again as if nothing happened. Wait, it sounded like someone was moving inside. Could it be that she had returned again? I carefully opened the door and saw my mother. I let out a long sigh. "Mom, what are you doing here?" I said. "What do you mean, what am I doing here? If I don't come, this family will fall apart," my mother said sharply. I knew she was going to pressure me again to have children, but it's not that I don't want kids, it's that Hailey can't have them. I sighed and took a couple of steps toward the living room, but then I suddenly felt a chill run down my back. I suddenly remembered that before I left, I had rushed out and hadn't cleaned up the blood on the dining room floor. My original plan was to dispose of the body first and then come back to clean the blood. But who would have thought my mom came over first? I quickly turned and looked toward the dining room. The floor was clean, not a trace of blood anywhere. Did my mom clean it up? Such a large pool of blood, and she managed to clean it up without batting an eye. I didn't believe my mom had the courage or ability to do that. I looked at her again, and she seemed perfectly normal. As I was wondering, suddenly a voice came from behind me. "Hubby, you're back. Wash your hands and come eat." It was Hailey's voice. My breath froze. I forced myself to stop trembling and turned around. I saw Hailey standing there looking at me with a cold face. She was still wearing that white dress, and the blood-red scarf was still around her neck. The only difference was that a red flower design had appeared on her chest. It was right where I had stabbed her not long ago. "Why are you in a daze?" she said coldly. This time I had definitely stabbed her to death. It was not my imagination, but now here she was standing right in front of me. The red flower on her chest was obviously meant to cover the wound I left when I stabbed her, just like the red silk scarf was meant to cover the marks from when I strangled her the first time. In other words, neither strangling nor stabbing could completely kill her. I could see her touch her. She clearly wasn't a ghost. The only reasonable explanation was that she was some kind of creature that couldn't be easily killed. Definitely not human. But what exactly was she? I couldn't make sense of it. "Come on, get ready to eat." My mom walked over. I numbly washed my hands and went to the table. My mom was criticizing Hailey for using too much oil in the food. "This isn't just unhealthy, it's wasting money." My mom had never liked Hailey. My father passed away early, and she raised me on her own, always indulging me. In the past, she'd hold back out of consideration for Hailey's family, but after their fall from grace and the death of her parents, my mom no longer hid her dissatisfaction. Not only that, but she was also very displeased with Hailey for not being able to have children. A woman who can't have children is no different from being useless. She can't have kids and she can't even cook. My son's already done her a huge favor by letting her stay in the house. Then there's her skirt. What's that red thing on her chest? It looks ominous. I suggest you know your place and leave early. While eating, my mom continued to rant. Normally I'd ignore it, but today I had no idea what to make of Hailey sitting across the table. I wanted to stop my mom, but I didn't know how to say it. I couldn't just tell her that Hailey wasn't human. The air at the table felt like it was slowly thickening. I lowered my head and ate, not daring to look at Hailey or her. Hailey's head dropped lower and lower, looking guilty, as though she were an unworthy wife. "You shouldn't waste my sons." Suddenly, my mom's incessant chatter stopped. I looked up and saw Hailey standing. I didn't know when she had gotten up. She was holding a fruit knife and thrust it into my mom's neck, then pulled it out again. A spray of blood erupted. She immediately shoved the knife back and then pulled it out again. Her arm moved mechanically, repeatedly stabbing my mom's neck, turning one side into a blood-soaked mess. She stood there stabbing my mom's neck, her eyes fixed on me. Once again, I went crazy, rushing forward, grabbing the knife from her hand and stabbing her to death again. But my mom was already dead. It was her. She killed my mom. I ran into the kitchen, grabbed the bone cleaver, pulled her body into the bathroom, and chopped it into pieces. Blood splattered on my face, but I didn't care. I wanted to see if after all this, she could still come back to life. I packed her body into 7 large bags and drove to 7 different garbage bins around the city. I refused to believe that after all this, she could still come back. Once I finished, I returned home and stared at my mom's body for a long while. I couldn't deal with my mom's body right now. If I called the police, they would inevitably ask who killed her. If I told the truth that Hailey killed her, they'd ask where Hailey was. That would drag everything I had done into the open. I'd be finished. "Mom, I'm sorry." I wrapped her body tightly in plastic wrap to delay anyone finding her. I needed to use this time to liquidate my assets Mistress, and leave with Serena, the woman I truly loved. Mom, you wanted me to live a good life, right? You wanted grandchildren too. You'd be happy for me, wouldn't you? I put my mom's body in the bedroom and closed the door and windows. Then I called Serena. Serena was already 7 months pregnant, and we had already checked the gender. It was a boy. We couldn't afford to delay any longer. Pack up, we're leaving. Where to? She didn't understand. Don't worry about it, just come with me. Didn't you always want to live a carefree life with me? Now we're going. When Serena heard this, she was delighted, probably thinking that I had finally come to my senses. She didn't ask any more questions, hung up, and started packing. I quickly packed up and prepared to leave. Just then my phone rang. It was Serena's number. I quickly answered, but no one spoke. All I heard was a heartbreaking scream. A moment later, the call was disconnected. What happened to Serena? It was only then that I suddenly realized something chilling. That is, Hailey really hasn't come back this time. But did she just not come back to this house? Could she have gone to Serena's house? The thought of this possibility hit me like stepping naked into the freezing cold of winter. My entire body inside and out went cold. I couldn't stay any longer. I immediately got up and headed to Serena's place. Please don't let anything happen. Please don't let anything happen. Serena and my 7-month-old son, nothing must happen to them. 15 minutes later, I arrived at the small apartment I had bought for Serena. The door was slightly ajar. I gently pushed it open. The stench of blood hit me immediately, but the whole place was eerily quiet, making the blood smell even more sinister and terrifying. I slowly followed the scent of blood toward the bathroom. I heard soft singing coming from inside. It was a gentle lullaby. Good baby, go to sleep, get up early tomorrow. Get up early, go to school, the future is bright. The soft voice and warm melody floated out, giving me goosebumps all over. I slowly pushed open the door, and the sight before me almost made me faint. I saw Serena bloodied and mangled, lying in the bathtub, already dead. Her belly had been ripped open, and her insides spilled out, slumped in the tub. Hailey was sitting by the tub holding my son, 7 months old, ripped from Serena's belly. He showed no signs of life, like a blood-soaked doll obediently held in Hailey's arms. Hailey's clothes and body were covered in the marks of the dismemberment and reassembly I had done, twisting and turning as if the borders of various body parts. When Hailey saw me, she slowly lifted her head to look at me. Her face was smeared with Serena's splattered blood, her hair messy and hanging in front of her face. Hubby, you're here. Didn't you always want children? Now we have one, she said stiffly to me. I finally broke down. The only one who could come back was Hailey. Last time Hailey killed my mother. Hailey came back, but my mom didn't. So Serena and my son wouldn't be coming back either. Hailey killed them, and they were really dead. Why? Why can Hailey, this monster, keep coming back, but the people I truly loved can never return? Why? It's not fair. It's not fair. At this moment, I couldn't care about logic or reason anymore. I didn't care whether Hailey could come back again. I just wanted to kill her. I wanted to make sure she couldn't come back, to make her pay for killing my mom, my lover, my son. I walked up to her, and she smiled sorrowfully, looking up at me. I saw up close the marks of dismemberment and reassembly on her clothes and body. I had dismembered her and scattered her body parts across the city, and yet she could put herself back together and come back. This wasn't a monster. What else could it be? I raised my hand and stabbed her to death, but she didn't resist. She died once more. This time she died in the apartment I bought for Serena. I bought a knife and a meat grinder. I chopped up her body, ground her flesh into mush, and then flushed it down the drain. The bones, flesh, and tendons that couldn't be ground I took to the wilderness. I set them on fire and let the ashes scatter in the wind. I drove west out of the city. I didn't know where I wanted to go or where I could go, but I didn't want anything anymore. I just wanted to leave. I just wanted to leave. As long as I could get far away, I didn't care where I went. I was willing to go. It was dark, and there weren't many people or cars on the road. I accelerated, and it felt like I was flying. I drove all the way to the toll booth on the highway out of the city. I stopped to pay the toll and looked up. The person sitting in the toll booth was Hailey. I sped off in panic. The female driver of the car coming toward me also had Hailey's face. I drove to the outskirts, passed by a woman buying vegetables, and she had Hailey's face too. I abandoned the car and ran. The hotel front desk clerk also had Hailey's face. I collapsed on the ground, and a passerby came over to check if I was okay. It was Hailey's face again. Her face filled the air surrounding me tightly. I couldn't move anymore. Later, I was vaguely aware of being placed in a car which slowly drove me back to my house. I lay down on the bed I shared with Hailey. Half dreaming and half awake, I thought of the corpse of my mom lying in another room. No, not just that. Serena and my unborn son's bodies were in the apartment bathroom. The 3 people I cared most about in this world were all gone. Hailey had also been dismembered and burned to ashes. I was truly alone in this world. Would Hailey come back? She shouldn't, right? The faces of Hailey earlier must must have been hallucinations from my panic. But even if she does come back, it doesn't matter. There's nothing left for me to do in this life. We'll just keep fighting each other slowly. That doesn't sound so bad, does it? But why? Why can't Hailey die no matter what? I can't understand. When did she become a monster who can't be killed? I just can't figure it out. I drifted in and out of consciousness. At that moment, a gentle male voice echoed in my mind. It's you. You made her into a monster who can't be killed. Since the day you married her, she became a monster who can't die. The soft voice spoke gently. At that moment, my long-buried memory suddenly came to life. It was me. It was all me. 10 years ago at Hailey and my wedding. The moment we exchanged rings, time seemed to stop. Hailey's smile froze on her face, and she became completely still. The guests in the audience were the same, frozen in place. The officiant standing between us was also frozen, his robotic smile stuck on his face. Just as I was confused, I heard a crack. It was the sound of bones cracking. It came from the officiant. I looked at him, his body still facing me, unmoving, but his head slowly began to turn backward. I heard the sound of his neck cracking, like bones twisting and snapping, or like rusty gears grinding, until his head turned 180 degrees. Where his back should have been, there was another face exactly the same, but this face was closed-eyed, pale as plaster, with no color of life in it. Suddenly, the lifeless eyes opened. "Do you love her?" he asked. "I do love her," I answered without hesitation. That was my true answer. Back then, I truly loved Hailey. She was vibrant, smart, and gentle, and even without her family background, she was the perfect lover, the perfect wife. I loved her with sincerity and passion back then. It was me, the poor guy, who was always afraid I wasn't good enough for her, always afraid she would regret it or leave me. So when that pale, evil face asked if I loved Hailey, I didn't hesitate. "Then do you want her to love you forever?" he asked again. "I do." I still didn't hesitate. I wanted to be with Hailey forever. Back then, I was confident that I would love her forever. What I was worried about was whether she would love me forever. If there was a way to make her love me forever, I would do it without a second thought. This thing is called never-changing love. His arm twisted impossibly, and from his pocket he pulled out a small white pill. "As long as you take this never-changing love, your lover will love you forever, never changing." I looked at the small white pill. "Do you want to take it?" I looked at Hailey, who stood motionless, and the frozen guests in the audience. He looked suspicious, but the scene made it hard not to believe that some supernatural force was really at work. "I'll take it." I took the white pill and swallowed it. "Then I wish you both a lifetime of love, never changing," he said. 10 years ago, my love for Hailey was real. 10 years later, my hatred for Hailey is real too. I never imagined that in just 10 years the relationship between us would change so drastically. Marriage truly changed us completely. When was the first time I became impatient? When was the first time I felt tired? When was the first time I came home but didn't want to get out of the car, just wanting to sit in the garage and space out? When was the first time my eyes turned to other women? When did I lie for the first time, cheat for the first time, think about divorce for the first time, feel murderous intent for the first time? When did all of that happen? I can't even remember anymore. 10 years, just 10 years, was enough to turn us from a loving couple into a pair of bitter enemies. How did all of this happen? In these 10 years, I've long since cast aside the vow of forever loving her. I've long forgotten the wish of hoping she will always love me. Is there such a thing as forever? That pale, deathly face, that moment when time froze. It must have just been a fleeting fantasy, a moment of anxiety before marriage. How could there be love that never changes? It was all just a plan to fool children. There was a time when I thought like that, until I forgot even these attempts to convince myself, until I struck Hailey with the intent to kill, until Hailey, bearing the wounds I gave her, returned from death again and again. Then I realized forever unchanging is real. She won't die. She will never die. Even if she becomes shattered, even if she turns to ashes, she will always return and continue to love me. This is forever unchanging. In a daze, I saw that pale face approach me from the empty darkness. "Only 10 years, and you already regret it?" he asked. "Yes, I regret it. Please let me go," I begged him. "No," he smiled slightly. When I said forever unchanging, I meant forever unchanging. Not a second less, not a moment less. I really know I was wrong. I bowed deeply to him, banging my forehead against the ground until it bled, but he just watched me indifferently. "Is this how casually you treat vows nowadays? Just 10 years, and you can dismiss the vows you made as nothing, just regret it when you feel like it? What do you take love for? What do you take marriage for? If you weren't prepared to bear the consequences, why did you even speak vows of forever? What, you think you have the right to divorce? Of course you do. I'm not stopping you from divorcing, am I? But you don't want to pay the price for it, yet you want to easily overturn your vows. Don't you think you're being naive? There's no such thing as a good deal like that in this world. He looked down at me. I've paid the price. I've lost my mother, I've lost Serena, I've lost my son. Isn't that enough of a price? No, you haven't paid the price. The price is to honestly reveal your selfishness, your filth, your evil to Hailey. Tell her you've fallen out of love, that you want to leave her and accept all of her curses and accusations. The price is to give Hailey every possible compensation you could and should give, instead of avoiding these compensations and killing your spouse whom you once swore to love. The price is to be willing to take responsibility, not to be forced into loss when there's no other choice. That's not a price, that's just what you deserve, he said coldly. I'm willing to pay the price, I really am. Any price I will pay. Really? I nodded vigorously. But it's too late. After everything you've done, you no longer have the chance to pay the price. That a terrifying possibility flashed in my mind. Yes, your only option now is to accept her forever unchanging love until she grows old and peacefully passes away. No, I don't want that. This is marriage. Loving each other, supporting each other, and walking through life together. That's marriage. Hating each other, loathing each other, yet unable to separate. That's also marriage. No one can take the good without facing the bad. You'll just have to spend the rest of your life awakening to this truth. He didn't give me a chance to protest, and in the blink of an eye he disappeared. Hubby, wake up. In my days I heard Hailey's voice. She really came back again, didn't she? I opened my eyes and saw her crouching at the edge of the bed, staring at me with concern. The bedroom light was not on. Her face, her body were hidden in darkness. I glanced out the window. Dawn was approaching. Hubby, are you alright? You kept screaming earlier. You must have had a nightmare. Her voice was so gentle, as if nothing had happened. Or maybe everything was just a dream. I never tried to kill her, and I never cheated. She never killed my mother, nor my cheating partner, or my unborn son. At this dim hour, everything before me felt blurry, unreal. I must have had a very long dream. Now that I'm awake, it was all just a false alarm. Actually, Hailey is a very good wife. Living a quiet, steady life with her should have been a happy life. We were once the enviable, loving couple. Why did I ruin all of that? Do I still have a chance to return to such a life? Wasn't it supposed to be forever unchanging? Then I'll admit it now, accept it, and devote myself to this eternal love. It should still be possible, right? I let out a long sigh. A false alarm. What a wonderful term. It's nothing. I think I just had a nightmare. Oh, what was the dream? We separated in the dream. Anything else? A lot of bloody things happened. That sounds like a scary dream. Yeah, but thankfully it was just a dream. But what kind of blood was it, hubby? Cheating, killing, dismembering, cutting open bellies, and so on. Like this. She suddenly snapped on the bedroom light. The entire room became blindingly bright. The light struck my eyes, and after squinting for a while, I finally saw Hailey clearly. Her whole body was swollen with blood-red soft flesh. Her face was broken beyond recognition, thick liquid flowing from her eyes and nostrils. She looked like a monster made from shredded flesh. It was the flesh I had torn apart and reassembled into a person. A red scarf could cover the marks of me strangling her. A red flower could cover the marks of me stabbing her. A patched-up garment could cover the marks of me dismembering her. But now, after I shredded her, there was nothing that could cover the traces. And I had also taken the bones and flesh I couldn't shred and burned them to ashes in the wilderness. So she was surrounded by a choking cloud of ashes. Now she looked like a pile of rotten flesh and ashes. Hubby, we will grow old together, love each other until death. She stared at me and said, I had no other choice. I kill her and she comes back to life. I run from her and she will track me down to the ends of the earth, bringing me back home. And I have already lost the chance to leave her by paying a normal price. Because she is no longer a woman I can easily divorce. She won't accept it now, she can't accept it. I stared at the pile of shredded meat that used to be Hailey. Finally, I resigned to my fate. I didn't struggle anymore. I got out of bed, washed up, and prepared to go to work. It was just another normal working day. My mother's body had long been disposed of by this pile of meat. Serena and my son's bodies had also been dealt with by this pile of meat. She gently prepared breakfast for me. She softly wished me not to hurry as there was still time. I smiled and said, thanks honey, breakfast is great. As if the pile of rotting meat in front of me wasn't her, but my beautiful wife. I immersed myself back in work. My company grew larger. I took her to various social occasions. In the eyes of others, she was still the beautiful, graceful, dignified, and proper lady. Only in my eyes did she remain that pile of crimson, decaying flesh surrounded by ashes. This must be my price. Everyone else saw her as beautiful. Only I saw her as rotting. I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. That mockery of middle-aged couples kissing a nightmare that lasts for days, this is what it meant. Only between husband and wife can one see each other's ugliest side. Love and disgust, they are two sides of the same coin in marriage. We became the most respectful, loving, and beautiful couple. We were once again the envy of everyone, the model couple. I gradually got used to waking up every morning with a pile of rotting flesh beside me. Years passed, and we still had no children, as it was impossible for me to have children with her. So we adopted 2 children, 1 boy, 1 girl, both very well behaved. We poured our time into our company and children, and time passed quickly, half a lifetime gone in the blink of an eye. The children grew up, and we grew old. In the mirror, I could see the white hairs I could no longer hide, and the increasingly bent spine. I handed the company over to the 2 kids. I spent my days reading, tending flowers, and walking. She did the same. We became the most ordinary couple living simple lives. In the end, we fulfilled the promises we made at our wedding. We grew old together, loving each other until death. In the summer of my 83rd year, one evening when I returned from a walk, I opened the door and saw a pile of rotten flesh on the floor. For a moment, I didn't understand what had happened. After a brief silence, I realized she was dead. She had finally passed away, naturally heading toward her own death. I suppressed my excitement and first called an ambulance, then contacted the children. The ambulance took her away. The doctor said it was a myocardial infarction, a common cause of death for someone her age. The children cried uncontrollably in front of me. I sat numbly on the living room couch, staring at a point in the empty space, silent. The children, relatives, and friends thought I was overwhelmed with grief, afraid to disturb me. Little did they know I was overjoyed. I was finally free. We held a very proper funeral for her. After the funeral, I asked everyone to leave, wanting to be alone with her for a while. The children, relatives, and friends all left. I stood on her grave, excited. I wanted to shout. No one can stop me now. I can shout out loud. I shouted at the grave, at the trees, at the mountains. I am free. I am fucking free. I was too excited. I heard my heart racing. My arms began to numb. My breath grew short. I could hear no other sounds. I only heard myself crashing to the ground. Am I going to die too? How ironic. On the day I finally gained freedom, I die. Before the total darkness descended, I thought to myself. I opened my eyes. I was at my wedding with Hailey. At the moment we exchanged rings, time froze. The pale face behind the officiant appeared. He asked me, "Do you want to take this eternal love pill? Okay, you've now seen the consequences of taking this eternal pill. Do you still want to take it? Were those consequences you showed me the result of taking this pill? Yes, I am honest with you. I want you to know the power of this eternal pill. Then you can decide whether to take it or not. No, you're just trying to scare me by creating false illusions. No. What you see depends entirely on what kind of person you are. In other words, the kind of person you are will determine the only future you'll see. That is your future. So will you take it?" Hearing this, I quickly pushed away his hand that was folding back towards me. "I won't take it." "All right, then I wish you good luck." After he spoke, he disappeared. Time began to flow again. The wedding ceremony with Hailey continued. Next, we were to exchange rings. I had just reached out to put the ring on her finger when I suddenly stopped. I turned my head and saw my mother sitting in the audience, and not far away, Serena. My mother hadn't turned into an evil mother-in-law yet. Serena and I hadn't even spoken a word. I was still a free man. It's not too late to regret. I retracted my hand and put the ring away. "Hailey, I'm sorry," I said, then turned and fled from the hall. I ran towards the outside, leaving Hailey, my parents, and friends behind. I didn't want any of this. I wanted freedom. My body was still so young and I could run so fast. I wanted freedom. I wanted freedom. I was so excited, running so fast that I didn't notice the car speeding towards me when I crossed the road. The car hit me hard, throwing me into the air. But even during those 2 seconds as I flew through the air, I felt happiness because I was free. After being thrown into the air, I crashed heavily to the ground. My vision instantly turned black. When I woke up from the darkness, I found myself back at my wedding with Hailey. We were about to exchange rings again. What was going on? I had refused. I didn't take the eternal love pill. Why was this happening? That face appeared in front of me once more. "Yes, you didn't take the eternal pill, but he pointed to Hailey standing across from me. "She took it." After saying that, he burst into laughter. His sharp laughter pierced the air of the wedding venue, straight into my brain. My body no longer obeyed me. My hand wouldn't listen to me. I felt waves of intense pain in my lower body, the pain from being hit by the car. I looked down at my body, which seemed to have been stitched back together, but the pain from that moment of death still lingered. It turns out Hailey's life in that void was spent enduring this kind of excruciating pain. If she ever harbors murderous intent towards me in the future, each time she kills me, the pain in my body will increase. Now all I can hope for is that she never harbors murderous thoughts towards me. At that moment, the celebratory voice of the officiant moved the ceremony forward. The bride and groom, please exchange rings. Hailey and I exchanged rings. She still wore that familiar expressionless face. All right, let's wish the bride and groom a lifetime of love and eternal loyalty. Hailey gazed at me deeply. Finally, she smiled. The end. If you like Kitten's story, please follow and like it. Updated every morning at 9 a.m.